In 2016, a group of experts got together to try and decide on better ways of diagnosing and referring to children with language disorders. I'm going to tell you about why we did this and how we came to agree on the term developmental language disorder. And I'll say a bit about the criteria that we agreed we would recommend for identifying developmental language disorder. Children's language disorders often go unrecognised, and that's one reason why we started the Rally campaign to raise awareness of language learning impairments. We felt that these children's difficulties were just not being recognised, and one problem was that a whole range of terminology was being used to describe them. So we had terms like specific language impairment, developmental dysphasia, language delay, all being used pretty interchangeably. And when you get that amount of confusion in different terminology, it means that it's just very hard to communicate, it's hard to do research on the topic, and it also means that children don't necessarily get access to services that they should. We used an online method known as the Delphi process to try and get consensus between experts in terms of the terminology and diagnosis of language disorders in children. We started with a panel of 57 experts, which included a wide range of disciplines. We had psychologists, speech and language therapists, medics, audiologists, teachers, and also representatives of families of children with language problems. And in this process, you start with a set of statements where people are asked to see if they can rate them, and then you can evaluate how much agreement there is about these different statements, and then you go round and round repeating this process until you get reasonable agreement, with people getting feedback between each round so that they can then determine whether or not they want to change their minds. We agreed that the term language disorder should be used for children who had two basic characteristics. First, they have severe language problems that actually interfere with communication in everyday life and or affects educational progress. Second, those problems are not likely to resolve spontaneously, but they're more likely to persist over time. And making that judgment, of course, is not always easy, but we do have some information from previous studies that have followed children over time that can be used to help make that decision. For some children, language disorder is part of a coexisting biomedical condition, such as Down syndrome, autism spectrum disorder, or brain injury. And these children, it's important to recognise that they have a language disorder, but they are likely to need a kind of intervention that takes into account the other difficulties that go along with that particular condition. For many children, though, language disorder occurs as a major difficulty without any obvious explanation. And for these children, we recommend the term developmental language disorder. In the past, there's been a lot of confusion about the use of exclusionary factors, which have meant that children are only offered help if they have a very specific problem just with language and nothing else. Now, it's become increasingly obvious that many children with language problems do have additional coexisting conditions, such as some attentional problems or perhaps motor problems, for instance. And it seems inappropriate to rule those children out from getting help with their language. And the research literature gives no support to the idea that we should treat those as entirely separate. So our recommendation is that developmental language disorder can be used for children who have additional difficulties in other areas, and those difficulties should be noted but are not used to exclude a diagnosis of developmental language disorder. Developmental language disorder is not one single condition where every child is the same. Children present with a whole range of different types of problem. Language is itself very, very complex and can go wrong in various ways. And so we also recommend that the type of language problem needs to be properly documented. Is it affecting grammar? Is it affecting semantics or use of language or speech sounds, working memory and ability to produce words? In summary, we recommend that the term developmental language disorder be used for children who have persisting problems with language that affect everyday life in the absence of a specific biomedical condition. This is a skim through a very complex topic, but you can read much more about it in open access papers that are available on the web for anyone to read. To help spread the word, please share this with anyone who might be interested. Thank you.